Make any space the space. Whiffers.
Just can't shake that nostalgia? Give us a call at 1-800 Someone's Got Your Nose.
Won't you get a whiff of that?
Do you suffer from scent aesthesia?
This is Perfume on radio. Tune in, it's just a stereo. This is Perfume on the radio on Lookout FM.
You're listening to Perfume on the radio on Lookout FM.
Think about a time when something that you said had an impact on somebody. Maybe you broke up with someone, for instance. You said a few simple things like, I don't think this is working out, or, hey, I really think I need to be alone, and blam, cause and effect. You and the person spend the next few weeks in sadness, not eating, not sleeping. Your health suffers, your happiness. Lives are saved using nothing more than words. Words can also be deployed to ruin somebody's day. Your talk was kind of weak, we say, and someone's confidence is shattered. We can include people with words, and of course we can exclude them. This is the VIP section. Are you VIP? I often trip out over this when I think about it too much. You can move your mouth just a little bit, and that spasmodic muscle movement has real-world consequences. Words, in other words, are the highest expression, in my opinion at least, of human power. Now, much has been made about the relationship between language and smell. So to refresh your memory a bit, scent often borrows language from other fields. We use food terms like sweet, bitter, and the one I use a lot, mouthy. We also, of course, use music terminology, perfume notes, fragrance accords. We use formula-related terms like fougère, chypre, floral. And then my favorite, and here we get into some pretty imprecise terminology, words like ozonic. What in the world does that actually mean? For my money, language should have a basis of precision. If we're communicating something, I want to know that you get precisely what I mean. For that reason, I'm really into the idea of teaching people the actual names of the molecules. Allyl amyl glycolate, for instance, has something very specific in terms of meaning. So does methylcyclopentenolone, linalool, eugenol, etc. But sometimes I think this quest for precision might get a bit too abstract to be useful. For instance, in the case of the Crocker-Henderson system, which was developed in 1927 by American chemists Crocker and Henderson, this system assigned a numerical value to 4 components of each odor: fragrant, acid, burnt, and caprylic, by which they meant goatee, or animalic. With their system, vanillin scores 7 on the fragrance scale, 1 on the acid scale, 2 on the burnt, and 3 on the caprylic. So it's a 7, 1, 2, 3, which I guess makes as much sense as the words methylcyclopentenolone, except in their case it was meant to facilitate broader communication. So now that we've gotten through the long preamble, let's get to the show. As you may have guessed, this episode is about language and smell, but not in the way that you may be thinking. Today we're doing a sort of spotlight on a language that I love very, very much, Arabic. We're devoting the hour to exploring the language through calligraphy and, of course, through scent. My name is Saskia Wilson-Brown, and I should specify quickly that I am not a native Arabic speaker. I took 1.5 years of lessons during COVID, and that's the extent of it. A little knowledge is a dangerous thing, but luckily there are people that I know who know a lot. So I am a happy tourist here, and as a happy tourist, I'll be hosting this episode of Perfume on the Radio. Perfume on the Radio is a program produced by the Institute for Art and Olfaction, which is a nonprofit organization based in Los Angeles, California, that facilitates experimental practices and knowledge in the rich world of perfume and scent making. You can learn more about us at artandolfaction.com, but that's for later. For now, hang back and prepare to learn a couple things about the beautiful Arabic language on episode 17 of Perfume on the Radio, as we explore Kalima, which means the word. Our first guest on today's episode is Dr. Gaye Walton-Price, or Ustada Gaye, which means Professor Gaye. Ustada Gaye is passionate about the Arabic language and has been engaged in learning and teaching for more than 20 years, having earned her PhD in Arabic language and linguistics in 1990 from Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. She has traveled, lived, studied, and taught extensively in Egypt and Tunisia, and has taught at the university level at UC Davis, UC Berkeley, Penn State University, and the University of San Francisco, amongst others. She currently lives in Oakland, where she joined me on Zoom. I'm really excited to have you on. Obviously, you are my Arabic teacher, my beloved Ustada. And so I thought, what a wonderful opportunity to introduce the audience a little bit to just some basic understanding of this beautiful language. So thanks for joining.
No problem.
Cool. So I wanted to sort of start just by asking you a little bit about yourself. Like, how did you come to learn Arabic? What was your initial interest in the language?
Well, I have Professor Brevard Childs to thank for that. I graduated from college and then I went to divinity school at Yale. And he was my professor for biblical Hebrew. And he said to me, pulled me aside one day after class, and he said, you should really study Arabic, because Arabic and Hebrew are cousin languages. And I know you like languages, so you're going to really enjoy that. And so at his suggestion, the following semester, I enrolled in Arabic class, and it was love at first sight. I started studying and I said, this is what I want to devote my life to.
Wow.
And then thinking that I'm not an Arab by any stretch, I said, well, I have to get my PhD in order to be credible. So that was my path.
Wow.
After, I think, a year of study, I got a fellowship to go to Tunis for the summer. And it was through the University of Utah. And there was a professor there who was a specialist. He was a historian in North African history. And so he took a group of American students every year to Tunis. And we enrolled in the Bourguiba Institute there, where we took Arabic classes, and depending on our level, but we had to take an exam just to qualify for this program.
Wow.
At the end of the summer, they said to us at the Bourguiba Institute, they said, well, 2 of you will get scholarships if you want them to stay for the entire year. So I was like, ooh. So I did, I got it. And another person that actually had been my roommate for the summer got the other one. And so there we were, we embarked on our journey. And that first semester I took like Modern Standard Arabic, Tunisian Arabic, and then I had a couple of electives. But also, because it was an undergraduate program for people in combination of languages, they called it, I was able to teach English as a foreign language while I was there working and studying myself.
What a cool exchange that must have been.
Yeah.
And then for your PhD, I know you specialized in Egyptian literature, correct? Contemporary Egyptian literature.
Yes, I focused on the Egyptian short story during the 1970s and 80s. And I called it a new generation of Egyptian short story writers. And there was already a well-established literary tradition established in Egypt, which had started in the early 1900s, really, with their first novel, et cetera. But the people that were writing during that period were all young, and they were new, and they were talking about new topics that had not really been touched upon by the older people. And most of them started out by publishing their short stories in the newspaper.
Oh.
That's what they did, and they hung out in groups in the coffee houses discussing literary themes. And often their stories were cleverly disguised social criticism against the government, against, the social conditions in Egypt, the policies, etc.
I'm sure many cigarettes were smoked in those intellectual circles. I can only and coffee. Oh, I wish I could go back.
Right.
So what is it that, you said that when you discovered Arabic, it was love at first sight. What was it about the language that was love?
Well, the language itself is beautiful. I think there was some sort of maybe deja vu recognition I felt an affinity for it. And especially when I went overseas and I began to experience it firsthand, there was just something very attractive to me. I don't know exactly what it was. It was an incandescent quality about the language itself, but it's very well organized. It's a phonetic language, so everything that you see is what you hear. It's just beautifully organized. And, there's some basic characteristics about Arabic that make it unique in terms of world languages. First of all, it's part of the Afro-Asiatic language family, which is different from where English is. English is Indo-European. And so it's going to be very different for a native speaker of Western language to approach Arabic, because it's a whole different bag of qualities and things that one has to get used to. First of all, it's written from right to left.
Right.
And so that is, and then because it is a cursive language, it means that the majority of the 28 letters of the alphabet have a form. They're connected one to the other, except for 6 of the letters, and they're called one-way connectors. And so those one-way connectors only connect on their right side, not on their left.
Right.
And then also, because it is cursive, it means that every position of a word has a slightly different variation of that letter. For example, there's the beginning of a word, that's one position. There's the middle of the word, which is a second position. And then there's the final word position for the letter. So each letter has potentially 4 different forms. So when I'm teaching it, the first month at least is spent just teaching the alphabet.
That's true. I can attest to that.
Right?
Yeah.
I have to say, though, of the 28 letters, most of them are familiar to English speakers and to speakers of Western languages. But there are 6 of them which are different. They're, either guttural, or they're what we call emphatic, meaning you have to position your tongue sort of going up to the roof of your mouth, and it creates more of a full sound.
Right.
There is both the normal T, for example. There's a normal T, which is ta, and then there's the emphatic T, which is ta.
Right.
You see, so there are 4 of those, and there are just a few abnormalities that I really have to instruct, because students are not used to speaking, making those sounds. Of course, we all, as humans, we all have the same equipment to produce the sounds. It's just what you get used to as you're growing up,
Totally. And those are the sounds that I do think, for someone who, if someone does not speak or wasn't raised in Arabic, those are the sounds that sound so different. For instance, the other one is the ha,
Yes.
And you'll say it better. But those are, you really have to learn how to shape your mouth around them, right? But once you do, it's amazing.
It is. It happens. And that's another thing that I really appreciate about Arabic, because over the years, as I was started as a beginner, as you progress, as you devote your time and energy to Arabic, it rewards you, because there is these aha moments over and over again if you keep at it. Of course, a lot of people get discouraged and they say, oh, I can't do this.
Yeah.
But yes, you can. And I'm here to testify that, yes, you can, because I started from 0 and I was an older adult at the time. I was in grad school already. So I wasn't like many of my students now are in their early 20s, even younger.
So when you were learning Arabic, you said you started with modern standard, and then you learned Tunisian, and then I know also now you're an expert on Egyptian Arabic, obviously. So can we talk a little bit about the different dialects of Arabic? How do they interact, and are they that different?
They are. It's not just like British English and American English. It's quite different. And so when we talk about the Arabic language, that is really more of an umbrella term. No one actually speaks modern standard as their native tongue. So Arab children go to school speaking their own local language. And then when they are, 6 or 7 years old, then they begin to learn the standard. And so if you take, for example, the Arab League, where there are 22 member nations. They all speak their own brand of Arabic. It's all Arabic, but because of location and geography and everything, they're all different. However, they have to speak in modern standard, because everybody who is educated knows it. It's kind of like Latin was at one time, the lingua franca. And so that's what modern standard does for us. All of literature is written in modern standard, except if it's like, contemporary plays and that kind of thing. Poetry is written in modern standard, novels, screenplays, everything, except when there's dialogue, then it is generally in the colloquial of where it's taking place. So each dialect is somewhat unique. Just the way that we characterize a language in general, sort of from linguistic terms, we can do that with all of the dialects. When I was in grad school, I took a class called dialectology, and it was fascinating. It breaks down how the different dialects differ one from the other, and what are the characteristics of a particular dialect. Like, for example, the North African, so that would be Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia, and Libya to some extent. They tend to have consonant clusters at the beginning of words. And some of their, like the Jim, the J letter, is softer. It has the influence of the French, perhaps. Je, rather than je, it's not a hard J. And then as we get to Egypt, of course, they have some characteristics that are well known because of Egyptian films being so widespread and Egyptian music being so widespread. So many Arabs know they're familiar with Egyptian, so they understand it, but they don't speak it necessarily. They will speak, their own variety.
I can't remember which country or which area where the je becomes ge suddenly. Is that Egyptian?
That's Egypt, right. And the Yemenis also tend to do that as well. And also the Egyptians have the qaf down here in your throat. It becomes a hamza, or just ah.
Oh, interesting.
Many words in the Egyptian dialect, except for those words that are official, like El-Quran. They would never take the qaf out of El-Quran because that's the holy book. And there's more of a rhythm, I guess. A sing-songy, as I've heard some people say, sing-songy rhythm to Egyptian, whereas other are not that way. And of course, Saudi Arabia, I think, has the dialect that is closest to modern standard.
Okay. So another thing I found really fascinating about the language is word roots. And this is something that I thought, or you taught me to believe was really beautiful and poetic. And I took that to heart. I really think it is. And there's connections you make across words.
Yes.
So can you explain how those work a little, word roots?
Well, most of the words, and then we're talking about nouns, adjectives, and verbs. These are the three categories that all have, for the most part, a triliteral root, meaning you have three consonants in a specific order, and that root itself has a general meaning. Like, I'll take a simple one, ketaba, kaf, ta, and ba. And so this has to do with writing. And so the verb itself, ketaba, he wrote. And then the word for book is kitab, those same three letters. And then the word for desk, for example, is mektab. And the word for library is mektaba. And the word for writer is katib. You see, so those three letters get sort of manipulated. Things get added in between or at the beginning or at the end. And it's still maintaining the core meaning of writing, you see. So it's either the one who wrote or who writes. It could be the act of writing itself. It could be a book, which is a product of writing. So all these things that have to do with that same core meaning, and they have those same three letters somewhere in them. That's how the root system works. And that's really how the language has evolved, I believe.
This is one of the reasons I thought Arabic was so beautiful, was you start to see social relationships,
Yes, all the time.
And logical conclusions and philosophical stuff slides in there. It's super, super cool. I can't think of any equivalent in English.
There isn't one. Now, of course, other Semitic languages do have they have a root system, Hebrew being the most notable. It's part of the Semitic is a sort of a subgroup of the Afro-Asiatic language family. There are many, many languages in there, and then it's divided into subgroups. So that's one characteristic of the Semitic group of languages, having a root system.
Super cool. Well, cool. Well, maybe to close us out, maybe you can teach us a couple words that relate to smell.
So the first one is shaven.
Shaven.
Right. And so this means fragrance, scent, aroma, or it also means bouquet of wine.
Oh, right. Oh, that's awesome.
I thought so too. And then there are a couple of words that are related to it. There's shedu, which means the fragrance of musk.
And musk was an important fragrance in the Quran, because I believe the prophet wore musk. They say that his skin was shiny with musk.
Yes, right. Then the second word, which is the one that I knew about before I did a little research, is atar.
Atar.
Yes, it means perfume, scent, or essence. And I would say that this is the most general word, and kind of why I knew about it, because I hadn't delved into, the whole world of scent before this. But there is an adjective related to that same root. It's called atir. And that means something that is fragrant and sweet smelling.
Lovely.
Yeah. And then the perfumery, the guy who makes the perfumes is atar. So there's the name for the profession based on this same word, which I thought was, because if you go to the old city in any of the Arab cities, there's going to be the perfumery section where you have the atarat.
the perfume makers.
Yes, exactly.
So atar is a short A sound, and then atar is a long A sound, and that's the difference between perfume and perfumer. Did I get that right?
It's not really a short A at the beginning. It's atar. It's an ain, one of those throat letters, again with a kasra, with a short I.
Atar. Okay.
Yes, and then followed by the ta, which is the emphatic T. So it's a hard word for us to pronounce.
Yeah.
Atar. There's one more word which was striking to me, and it's ra'iha.
Ra'iha.
And this just means any kind of smell or odor. So it's, sort of the opposite of atar, which is something smelling nice and pleasant. And then ra'iha is just in general to describe another smell that's not necessarily pleasant. And it has to do with the word to breathe, raha, like the breath. So I thought that was fascinating too.
That is lovely. These are beautiful words and so fragrant. Well, how would you say have a fragrant day?
We could say Yom Atir.
Yom Atir.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, one last thing. I remember that you taught us that Sabah al-Nur. And then there's the response can be Sabah al-Nur means.
No, that is the response. Sabah al-Khair.
Sabah al-Khair, okay.
It means morning of goodness. And then the response is Sabah al-Nur, which
morning
means
of light.
Morning of light, yes.
But then there was a jasmine related one, is that correct?
Yes, Sabah al-Ful.
Sabah al-Ful.
Yes, Ful, with like 2 L's at the end. Sabah al-Ful, which they used to say a lot when I was in Tunis, because it was summertime my first time there, and the jasmine were all in full bloom. So they would say, Sabah al-Ful, may your day be fragrant as the jasmine, right?
That's so nice. Well, Sabah al-Ful, Ustada Gaye, thank you so much for your time and for explaining a little bit of this beautiful language to our people.
You're so welcome. It was my pleasure.
That was the joyous and lovely Dr. Gaye Walton-Price. You can learn more about Gaye and even do what I did and learn from her at her website, alarabia.live. That's al-arabia.live. Our next guest is Razwan Ul-Haq. Based in Bradford in the north of England, Razwan uses classical Arabic calligraphy techniques to create contemporary pieces. Razwan has been featured in national and international press, including The Times, BBC, Channel 4, and has received many large-scale commissions, including one by Leeds City Art Gallery to celebrate the birthday of the Queen of England. He does want us to note, however, that he is not related to any member of the royal family. Here is Razwan.
My name is Razwan Ul-Haq, and I'm currently living in Bradford. I was born in Lancashire. I sort of started off life as an artist, then I went into teaching, and then I decided to go back into art. My art form is calligraphy. I use traditional materials, bamboo pens, my own ink, and I do Arabic calligraphy, but also I've got an exhibition on right now where I've got some Farsi calligraphy and Urdu calligraphy and a few other languages in the Arabic script in Bradford Industrial Museum. Olfactory art, well, not just olfactory art, but the idea of scent or the idea of smell or fragrance, I think has been with me for many, many, many years. It's a cultural, I mean, it is with everybody. You know, scent is an important part of our life. But for me, as a Muslim, firstly, it was everywhere. We know that, for example, religiously it's important. So Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, would wear scent. He used to carry around a musk bottle. And on Fridays, Muslims often wear a special scent, and during the day as well. I think when you go to the Middle East or Pakistan or Iran or Malaysia or Indonesia, or even here in Bradford or Leicester or London, and you go to an Islamic shop, you'll often find fragrances. So I think that's the first thing, that religiously it was important, and then religion seeps into culture. I think in the East, as you know, Saskia, I mean, we had a wonderful talk.
We did.
We did, and we could have carried on forever.
Yes.
I think in the East, I mean, everywhere really, but more readily nowadays, in the East, religious ideas, spirituality, the religion creeps into the culture, perhaps more so than in the modern West. So, for example, some people may not know that the Quran, for example, says that in heaven, drinks are sealed by the scent of musk, and camphor is mentioned.
Saffron, I believe, as well, right? Saffron.
Yes, saffron. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And also we mustn't forget that the Kaaba in Mecca, for example, is scented. Rose scent is added from Iran and Turkey. So people may not actually know that, but it's everywhere. And I think the second aspect of it is the philosophical, the scientific, the medicinal aspect of scent itself. So, for example, you know, we know that some perfume making equipment like the Alemba, you know, and a few others have Arabic sounding names. But if we go right at the beginning of Islam, so for example, if we look at the 8th century, you've got Jabir ibn Khiyan doing absolutely phenomenal work on evaporating and distillating the essence, the scent of flowers and of different substances. And then after him, you have Al-Kindi. And Al-Kindi then writes a book about the importance of fragrance and scent. And so it's now going a little bit beyond a sort of secular religious sort of line. It's an important aspect. And then afterwards, of course, we've got Ibn Sina, and Ibn Sina going even more further and saying, for example, that the essence of rose, the smell itself, can actually help with heart palpitations, or if someone's is subject to fainting a lot, it helps, and ulcers and so on. And so I think for these reasons, it was always there. You know, it was always there in my life and in the life of many, many Muslim children growing up.
I'm curious about sort of when you first became aware of a potential relationship between the script and scent and how you first started thinking about that.
That's very interesting because for me, decades earlier in my life, scent played an important part. What I was noticing was that in the in the West here and in Pakistan and even in Saudi Arabia and in other places like Iran and Turkey, scent was becoming commercialized. The essence of the substance, the natural substance, the organic substance was being replaced by, chemicals. Now, there is a debate about that. Maybe now isn't the right time. There's good and bad in both. But what I was finding increasingly interesting was that just in my life itself, I was trying to get the organic essences of rose, of jasmine, trying to obtain musk wherever I could. It's very difficult to get hold of. Oud or aloes wood, cedar wood. And then I used to use frankincense as well. So it's not particularly based on one religion or one idea. When I look at, for example, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, or the early Muslims, you do find a very open door looking at life and looking at spirituality. So not that sort of strict Aristotelian box that, in the Quran it talks about, for example, Christians going to heaven. So, very different way of putting religion into boxes as we do now. It wasn't so much, this is my way of doing things and it's the best. And so I was also using scents from other places, not necessarily from Middle East or traditionally used. And so they were important in my life. And what I found was it helped during the day. And I can remember, Saskia, we had a talk about, I'm not a perfumer at all. But, I even experimented, mixing different sort of perfumes together, different bases, top, middle notes and something. I was going to bring some of my bottles here, but then I realized that you can't really smell them.
Or see them on the radio.
Or see them, see them on the radio. So scent was important, very, very important. And also at the beginning, when I was using my inks, many calligraphers put rose water in it. And sometimes I would put sandalwood inside my ink or lavender. And so, just opening the ink bottle and using ink had an effect. So it had a spiritual effect. And I think this is important for us to understand. There's an essence in these scents, whether it's Indian sandalwood, whether it's oud from the Middle East or Sri Lanka, whether, wherever it is, there is a very subtle something there. And when you're smelling that, then it opens up many aspects of your viscera. And so it has a functional effect. Yes, it's beautiful. Yes, it's fantastic, but it has an effect on your soul eventually. So in Arabic, the soul is nafs, and nafs has also a connection with breath, and breath, of course, has a connection with scent, with attar. So that was the first aspect that I think is important to understand. So last few months, I've been experimenting with different states of being, drawn by different smells. So not just organic, beautiful smells. I've also been using other scents, the smell of soil, the smell of industry and others, and trying to create strokes, trying to create calligraphy with that or during that, with the breath. And what's interesting is that you might not discern the difference in calligraphy. So, for example, the letter might be the same that you might have with rose. I might do a letter when I'm one with the essence of rose. So when I'm one with that smell, when I'm one with that fragrance, I might do a letter.
I see.
Now, I might do a letter when I'm not affected by rose on the surface. Those two letters might look similar. However, the important thing is that the effect of it will be different.
I see. Yeah. So to sort of make sure I understand what you're saying is let's use rose as an example. You'll get some rose, you'll smell it, you'll be with it. And when you feel that you're united with that smell, at that stage, you do the stroke for the letter. And that influences the essence of that letter and the effect of the letter possibly as well, right?
Exactly. And I love the word essence. Yes, sometimes the letter will change its visual characteristics. But what I want to emphasize, sometimes it may not. Now, that's where the mystery comes in. And that's where the essence comes in. It's really interesting. Sometimes we say the essence of rose, So it's almost as if the scent is connecting one person with another. So I suppose it goes a little bit deeper than that. So through scent, what we're doing is I as an artist, I'm connecting with the person looking at my art. And although they can't smell the rose, they may not even know Arabic. But how I was feeling when I was smelling the rose, I'm hoping that some of that is then beautifully, I don't know whether to use the word transferred or whether to use the word that it'll help the other person be at one with that in a different way. And now this goes back to what our view of the world is. If we believe that the world is one, everything is connected, and we are all one, if that's the framework of reference possibly that we use, then I think that with that framework of reference, then this beautiful situation sort of happens.
I'm curious. So, and a little bit of a caveat. I studied Arabic, so I have a knowledge of the alphabet, but it's cursory. But one thing that I was struck by in the Arabic script is that the letters change depending on their position. Some of them change depending on their position in the word. So you were talking just now about writing a stroke of a letter under the influence of rose and then not. And then there's this further sort of transformation aspect to the script, depending on where it's placed in the word and et cetera. So I feel like there could be all these variants of meaning and conveyance and sort of understanding that you could, it's almost limitless for someone in your position working with this amazing alphabet and these amazing smells.
Definitely. No, I feel very lucky, actually. I feel very lucky. And there are many Arabic calligraphers, like, for example, Hassan Mosoudi, who are able to write words and letters in Arabic, but they also just use strokes, and like Hassan Mosoudi, I also have looked at and studied, not in great depth. I can't call myself a master of Chinese calligraphy or Japanese calligraphy. But, whenever I've had the opportunity to read or to study or to go to masters and take classes and just talk the difference between calligraphy there, what I love about Japanese calligraphy is that it seems less bound by trying to get perfect looking word as we do in Latin calligraphy or Arabic calligraphy, but there is that emphasis on breath. And so it actually widens it even more. So I think, Saskia, when you're talking about calligraphy, Arabic calligraphy changing, it's very plastic. It's very flowing. And so you're absolutely right. The Arabic words can change and you have lots of choices where you want to make certain connections. But it's even greater when you add the sort of Chinese or Japanese way of doing a stroke and you add that to Arabic, then it becomes even more free-flowing and it opens up other dimensions. And I just like to mention Hassan Mosoudi here. I've just mentioned him, I think, before. He lives in Paris and he's from Iraq originally, and his books are readily available, calligraphy books. When you mentioned that, it reminded me of his work. And I've also started to add English calligraphy as well. I thought, what does English calligraphy mean to me? And I'm not really, well, in a way, of course, I am interested in traditional calligraphy. I am interested in how the aesthetics look and where it comes from. But personally, to me, I think it's the poetry. I've written English poetry for many, many years. And so I thought, perhaps for me, when I'm writing English, it's the meaning of the words themselves rather than how they look. And so I've also been experimenting with adding English layers English poetry to my Arabic. So it's even more opening things up.
Wow, I imagine it must. And then I know that you also, within the context of your calligraphy work, you practice as a contemporary artist. There's several layers of expression that your work takes. And so some of your work has been exploring modern life in Bradford a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit about how you interact these forms with, being a man in Northern England right now?
Well, at the moment, I've got an exhibition on at the Industrial Museum, the Bradford Industrial Museum. And the new pieces I did for them were based on Allama Iqbal and his poetry. Now, the interesting thing is here in Bradford, they used to make cars, they used to make motorbikes. And the cars and motorbikes were basically made before the Pakistani Indian diaspora, before people from mostly Pakistan, but also people from India and Bangladesh came here to the cities of the north. But Allama Iqbal talks about machination, the way life is going and the way modernity is going. It's not sustainable. And so I've created my response to some of the great, big, beautiful cars and motorbikes that are actually in the museum. It's a great big museum, and it has huge machines. So I use the Falcon, and I use the Eagle, because those were motifs in Allama Iqbal's poetry. So we're talking about Allama Muhammad Iqbal, the Pakistani poet, very, very famous in Iran, very famous in Germany, and of course in the subcontinent. So I did some of his Urdu poetry in a way to express that modern life is, as he says, almost defeating itself. Also, earlier this year, because it was very dark and everybody was inside, we did huge neon pieces that we put up in different places in Bradford. It went to mosques, and that is now being moved to an area where there are restaurants and places. I also do a lot of calligraphy workshops. There's a book that was supposed to be coming out 2 years ago. I mean, it did come out, but it still needs a bit more editing for Bigistan. And that focuses on the idiom of the North and Arabic calligraphy and poetry. Because I was born in the north of England, it was very exciting to actually think about how Urdu poetry or Arabic poetry is laid out and how those two could be enmeshed in one place. But the project I'm doing now is I've been experimenting with lots and lots of different scents and fragrances. Going back to what you said, Saskia, I think when you sometimes think about fragrances, because it's so linked with the breath and the soul, you go to the essence of something. For example, in the Industrial Museum, in the Bradford Industrial Museum, it has a very industrial smell. It's almost as if you as a human being are going back in time and you're connecting with the human beings that used to man those machines. I mean, I use the word man because they were mostly men, I suppose, but I'm sure there were many women who were doing that. That smell sort of connects you with other people. And when you do your art, even if it might look alien, it might look like Chinese calligraphy, it might look like Japanese calligraphy, it might look like Arabic calligraphy, but your beingness just washes all of that out and people understand it. We hear it every day, don't we? People will look at Chinese calligraphy and say, my gosh, I don't know what it is, but it's beautiful. Someone who might have some issues about Muslims or been watching too much television or YouTube or whatever, might say, oh my gosh, this is really incredible.
Yeah. There's something about that capacity to connect through beauty and then ultimately, hopefully, through meaning,
Yeah, but when you said beauty, it was really interesting. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said that, God is beautiful and he loves beauty. And the word in Arabic for doing good deeds is the same as beautiful, beautiful deeds. So that's really very, very interesting when you use the word beauty. And you have that sense of beauty and proportion in Arabic calligraphy as well as in Chinese calligraphy, Japanese calligraphy, and some of these other scripts where you have the word harmony.
Mm.
You know, one thing I felt was very similar in Far Eastern scripts and Arabic scripts was this concept, an idea, keep going back to, which is harmony. And although I'm traditionally trained and I love that, sometimes I step out of that. However, what's really interesting is that I still feel there should be harmony in the work. So, I might do something, very, with strong colors. But I'll be like thinking to myself, not deliberately saying, "Oh gosh, this needs to have a harmony," but inside, I feel it has to have harmony. And I think this is something that Far Eastern calligraphy and Arabic calligraphy, Persian calligraphy as well, the calligraphies have a harmonic aspect to it, which I think is really fantastic in modern times, especially with lots of not just young people, but middle-aged people as well, the elderly as well, not feeling good, not feeling as if, life is as it should be.
Totally.
Feeling very isolated from life, feeling stressed, sometimes feeling suicidal.
Yeah, I mean, the harmony can help. I mean, I think maybe people are really seeking harmony. I wonder if that's why people are so interested in perfumery right now as well, because it's sort of, there's a balance to it that is lacking from real life,
That's really interesting because when you talked about the balance in perfumery, where you have, for example, a top note, base note, and middle note, and there's harmony there, isn't there? There's a beauty there. And I think both calligraphy and perfumery, what we're doing in effect is we're going back to ourselves and who we are. If I smell a rose, a well-cultivated rose, my visceral senses, my spiritual senses, my mental senses, different faculties of my body, my soul, my mental aspect, perhaps one's animalistic aspect, perhaps one's vegetative aspect, all of these different sides to us open up. So it's almost as if we have a default position for beauty, for harmony.
Yeah.
Now it's my turn to be interested in what you're saying. I didn't know that there is a bit of an increase in perfumery.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that, please.
Yeah, well, I think I equate it to the fact that, and, I'll speak a little bit in cliche, but I think it's true, in this sort of digital age, we've become so disassociated from ourselves, and our bodies and our breath in a way. There's no breath in an email. It's just a barrage of text, and information conveyance. So I think that, I can speak to myself. What got me interested in working with scent was that I felt really, really, really alienated from being, if that makes sense. So I think that maybe I'm not the only one feeling that way. But I want to ask you a question that's a little bit prosaic, but I'm curious about it. And that is, when you're working with inks, how do you relate to the materiality of the ink, the smell, the physicality? Do you prepare your own inks?
Yes, mostly. Sometimes you don't have that luxury.
Yeah.
If you're doing a lot of work, or you're doing a series of works, or if you're doing one project after another. But yes, I do try to prepare my own inks. The most basic one is using soot. Captured smoke, and adding rainwater. Rainwater is very important because it has barakah.
Yeah.
It has a life to it. It has a soul to it that water that's come from the taps doesn't. So you have that rainwater and you mix it with soot, and then you mix it with gum arabic. Gum arabic you can find in many different shops. It's used in cooking as well as it's actually used in art. Some watercolor colorists, and I think also acrylic painters and other painters use it as well. So you mix that together, and then you can add rose water, or you can add the sandal and others, and you just keep mixing it. So it's pigmented ink. So the inks that are used in Arabic calligraphy traditionally are not dyes, but pigmented. And the reason you use pigmented ink is so that they stand on the surface. It's what we might call nowadays museum quality, or something that stays its course because it doesn't blend with the
soak into
paper.
the paper.
Yeah,
Right?
it doesn't
Got
soak into it. Yeah.
Okay.
Sometimes you would use a dye, but you would use a dye on official documents.
I
So,
see.
for example, if the caliph wanted an official document, he would use a dye that wouldn't be on the surface, or, for example, for an important certificate, because what will happen then is that it can't be forged.
I see. So it literally
yeah.
becomes part of the...
Yeah. So those are the mechanics of the ink, but also meditating and also saying some prayers. So the oft repeated Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of God, the most compassionate, the beneficent, or another translation would be, in the name of the one being, the kind, the all kindly, or the breath of compassion. I mean, there's different ways of translating these statements. So you'd be oft repeating these formulas when you're creating it. Because of the way my studio is, I use a lot of burners where I will put natural organic fragrances in. So those will also be part of the ink. It's quite a lengthy process, but I have to say, sometimes you don't have that luxury. But when I do create that sort of ink, you can feel the difference. And I also make my own pens as well. Well, I will get a bamboo, I will season it, and then I will cut that bamboo. And these are traditional skills that calligraphers do. I'll tell you what I don't do is making paper. That would be the complete, but it's too much for me to get the
you
pulp
have children
and create the paper. I do. Thank you, Saskia.
Yeah, it's hard to find the time.
Acknowledging. It is.
Yeah,
it is.
But so when you're preparing the inks, or when you're working with these inks, it sounds like it's a very physical process. There's the soot. You said sometimes, rainwater. You said sometimes you use rose water as well. Is that quite common to incorporate specific aromatics like rose water or into inks?
Yes, for traditional calligraphers, it is. Not so much nowadays. If you were in a class, for example, they generally just buy the ink. But I worked with calligraphers from different parts of the Muslim world: Turkey, Iran, Pakistan, Jordan, and all of them who use traditional ways, they will always use rose water. That is, I found one that calligraphers from all this area who are traditionally trained will use it. It's interesting as well that in Turkey, some of the calligraphers also cultivated roses as well. So some of the calligraphers also grew roses and tulips.
Oh, really? No kidding. Tulips. I'm trying to think if there's a scent to tulips. Maybe that's just for the sheer beauty.
There's an essence that you feel,
right,
and an essence that you see, but I think it's not as pronounced. I mean, I'm thinking when I've been to Turkey, so some of the gardens I've been to, there has been some beautiful smells, but you're not sure whether it's the tulips or something else. It's really interesting going back to flowery smells. I don't know. I know you've been to Bradford, and I don't know if you've been to David Hockney.
Yeah,
who's is he in California at this?
No, I think he moved back to England. I think he got fed up when Trump came to power.
Okay. Right.
Who can blame him?
Yeah, who could blame him? No. But yeah, David Hockney's Salts Mill is a place that he's been one of the benefactors of.
Okay.
And there they often have lilies. They've got these huge halls that you walk in. So one hall is art, one hall is selling art materials, one hall has got lots and lots of books, and it's a bookshop and so on. And they have lilies in there. And it's, the fragrance, it should not be underestimated, I think. The idea of an art gallery, which is Salts Mill is an art gallery come bookshop and so on, the difference that a true scent and a true fragrance makes to an area, and what it brings out, and the ambience that it creates, and the soul it adds to it is important. And I think this is why Hazrat Ibn Sina, Avicenna, Al-Kindi, and many of the others, Al-Razi as well, would talk about the healing effect of it, the functional healing effect of it. I think it's like light. Sunlight and light has a very profound effect on our inner senses. And I think because you can't measure the soul, there is a principle in some Sufi circles and some sort of Middle Eastern circles and some Muslim circles that the ruh, the absolute soul. So we're talking about the nafs, which is one part of the soul, but the ruh is considered to be the absolute essence, is immeasurable. but by its very nature, it belongs to another place. And I think that Western methodologies of doing a hypothesis and then testing a hypothesis, I think there's been some fantastic research that has uncovered some psychic elements, for example. But on the whole, I think it can't grab it. And I think this is so unfortunate that people don't understand how the fragrance of something can have a changing effect, a life-altering effect on one's being. It's, people talk about doing yoga, people talk about, Tai Chi, or people might talk about, changing my lifestyle. I'm doing this at 6 o'clock and I'm going to do this at 7 o'clock and then I'm going to eat organic vegetables. But being at one with real essence of flowers, of beautiful woody natural trees that are growing, and also of animals as well, I think can alter and have a profound effect on who you are.
That was Razwan Ul-Haq, who you can learn more about at ulhaq.com. That's ULHAQ. Most of the people he mentioned in our chat, from Jabir ibn Hayyan to Allama Iqbal, can be found on our website, perfumeontheradio.com, under the blog section. And that was our show, episode 17 of Perfume on the Radio, which we called Kalima is the Word. As always, I want to take an extra moment to thank Darian Zahedi, Maxwell Williams, and Emmett James for our Perfume on the Radio identities. And always, always, Lookout FM for hosting this admittedly rather niche radio show. Perfume on the Radio is produced by the Institute for Art and Olfaction, which is a nonprofit devoted to experimentation and access in the field of perfumery. This episode, like all others, will be archived on perfumeontheradio.com, and you can also download it on a podcast provider of your choice and enjoy it in a location of your choice. This week, I'm dreaming of traveling back in time to the 60s in Cairo, sitting in a cafe with a cigarette and a good coffee and a healthy conversation about literature. I'm Saskia Wilson-Brown, and I'm the founder of the IAO and your happy hostess for this episode. It has been my absolute pleasure to delve deep into a language that I really, really love. We'll be back in a couple weeks, and until then, friends, keep it kind, keep it real, and keep it ra'iha, which, as Dr. Walton-Price taught us, means smelly.
Perfume on the radio. This is Perfume on the radio on Lookout FM. This is Perfume on the radio. Tune in just a stereo. This is Perfume on the radio on Lookout FM. This is Perfume on the radio. Tune in just a stereo. This is Perfume on the radio on Lookout FM. You're listening to Perfume on the Radio on Lookout FM.